This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Matthews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. I'm super excited for today's guest. He is an award-winning sales leader with a stellar track record, deep-rooted history in recruiting, building, trading, and leading teams. He has expertise in increasing market share through innovative, differentiated messaging and customer-centric sales across PLG and SLG motions. We're going to have to get into that. They've navigated the landscapes of startups, scale-ups, and Fortune 500 companies alike. Most recently, a CRO at an early AI startup company. So an early company in that space, Fractional CRO at Sales Growth International. Welcome, Michael Eckhoff.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Wes. Good. Enjoy being here.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. I got to first ask you, Fractional CRO, right? Why in the world are you a Fractional CRO? What does that mean to you?
Well, besides having enough gray hair to say I've been around for a while, for me, it's an opportunity to do some of the things that I love and touch and affect multiple companies. So, I've spent my career growing from very large companies. I always recommend people start in a bigger company where you've got more established processes. You can learn and go through training, get good mentors, build relationships that'll last throughout the rest of your career. And I was lucky enough to do that early in my career. And then I made the jump into the startup world once I felt like I had had enough of corporate America and really wanted to get into more, direct involvement in growing and building, and moved into the startup world, had some fantastic runs with some great exits. And of course, in the startup world, you always have those that don't work out quite as well. It's a higher risk and higher reward scenario. What I found is in the past several years, the VC landscape has changed in that there's a lot of companies that get too much money, frankly, with a good idea, but not really the execution to demonstrate that. They haven't really gotten to true product market fit and the ability to start growing the business with anything other than a bunch of KPIs focused on how to get to the next round of funding. So in the last company, when we had to make some changes, retool the product, we decided that sales and marketing was not the right place to be spending money at that time. So stepped down and looked at a few companies out there and realized as a builder, I like growing companies. I like taking a company that's gotten that product market fit and then exploding it, right? Getting that exponential growth. And I didn't see a lot of those opportunities on the market. So rather than take something that wasn't the right fit for me, I stepped back into a advisory role and into a fractional CRO role. And what that means essentially is I'm working with a few different clients. I come in, I help them understand what are the challenges in their go-to-market model, in their sales structure, customer success structure, how the interplay between marketing and sales and product is operating, help them define and design whether they're product-led sales, product-led growth, some hybrid between that, and then really identify and execute on how do we make those changes to help them hit that next stage of growth.
You mentioned something that I want to hit on, about not investing in sales versus like product. I mean, from a CRO perspective, right? You have the sales channel, right? You have to sell the donuts, but you also have to make the donuts. Is that you didn't want to invest in sales because I want to talk on the deliverable. Is that because the product and the deliverable was not at a certain standard quite yet? Or can you dive in a little bit on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things you got to think about when you're looking at being able to scale a product. In the early stage, in my opinion, the best companies are those that start out founder-led. Founder has passion. They've got a network of people. The founder is doing the early stage sales because you can feel that energy when you're sitting down with a founder who's excited about a product. They've put something out they think is really interesting. And in many cases, those early adopters or those even very beyond that, I'm kind of a advocate of the Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm model. But and what people don't realize is that it's not just one chasm between early adopter and mass market. There's actually a chasm between every stage in that product lifecycle growth. And those very, very early adopters that are quite often friends and family or referral sales are great ways to test the product. But you've got to make sure that those customers are happy, that they're actually getting value from the product before you can move into the next stage where you try to start scaling your sales team. And that's where that transition from founder-led sales to a true sales team, many companies are falling down at that stage because founders can convince somebody to buy a product, but they may not be getting a tremendous amount of value, or there may be barriers to getting that product in production or product getting adoption across an organization. And to truly hit that scale factor, you've got to be able to show adoption, ongoing value, and drive that across multiple companies, multiple industries, multiple segments, whatever that is. You've got to understand what your target market is and be able to replicate that value across that audience.
What's a typical time frame for that, in your opinion? Right, I know it could probably vary and be all over the place, but as an entrepreneur, like I'm like boom, 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 like I want to go, 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 go. But what in your experience, what does that typically translate to?
It's years. I rarely ever see that happen in less than a year or two, and sometimes it can take 5, even 10 years before you really see that adoption happen. And a lot of it comes down to market dynamics. And it's one of the things we had quite a bit that we focused on in the last company was that the product they built was early. It was something the market didn't know it needed yet. And as many of the companies out there, we start talking to them, they find out, they see this, they're like, this is amazing. I'm not sure how I would use it, but it's absolutely incredible. It's a great product. That gives you the indicator that you're probably a little early to the market with that solution. And with the obviously the boom of AI that happened with the widespread recognition of ChatGPT, now everything is AI. So if you're selling an early stage AI product, and then now large language model becomes the de facto definition of AI, and you're not in the large language model space, it causes a lot of distraction. And so what winds up happening is there's a lot of focus on it. You get a lot of attention, but you start to find out that the actual utility of the product you're selling doesn't fit the market. And so that's when you have to think about retooling, changing the product, or changing the basic problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, you bring up some good things, because as I'm listening to you, I'm reflecting in my own mind. Like I had a digital marketing company for 15 years. I sold it in 21. And part of that reason that drove that is I'm like, back in like the early, 2010 SEO organic search, like that was the thing. But then all of a sudden here comes AI. And in my mind, my crystal ball was like, this industry is going to get completely disrupted by AI. Like I don't think it's quite happened yet, but I see so many products and little things coming into the market now that used to be like back then you had to buy this whole solution and you got to go on Salesforce or this big clunky system. But now there's a lot of little things that you can piecemeal together. I used to joke with people back then and say, hey, you don't want, your sister's cousin's brother's friend building your website. You want to hire a professional company. And today I look at that statement and say, man, that same person with access today can build some really cool stuff and actually do a really good job. So I want to touch on that because you have sales experience around AI. And I think that's a real hot button with a lot of entrepreneurs. Can you talk about that, or like, what's the biggest shifts you've seen in the past like 5 years, or just your general feedback on that?
Yeah, and I think you hit on the key point, which is it used to be that anybody can go build a website. I can go to one of the online tools. I can go to WordPress and build a website. It's not going to be very good. If I use AI technology, I can still do that and it'll be better. But that doesn't change the fact that the human experience, the human knowledge that's guiding the AI is the real differentiator. And I think that's true across every function that you have. I know some companies out there that are helping train people on how to write secure code. And yes, I can write code with AI. Is that code going to follow my standard corporate security practices? Is it going to write code that is better and less vulnerable than the code that a professional developer would write? Probably not. What it's going to do is it's going to accelerate the pace of release of code and give even more opportunity for error and bugs. Because now I'm letting an AI do things in seconds or minutes that might take me hours. And if I don't know what I'm doing, then I'm just making more problems. It's kind of the same thing with sales. If you think about the proliferation of AI-based sales tools, what are most people doing and what are most companies doing? They're bolting on a large language model to an existing product, and that's like taking your grandma's 1970 Chevy Nova, and putting a supercharged Ferrari engine into it and saying, here you go, take it away. What's going to happen? Well, it's probably going to break down. You're probably going to crash. You're going to hurt yourself. And I think that's what's happening in a lot of cases right now is the use of AI completely unfettered, without guidance, without controls, is putting people into bad position.
So what's the opportunity for an entrepreneurial company, right? A lot of founders are asking that question. AI, just and it to me, it's very similar to when I started my web company in SEO. Like SEO came about, and there was different levels of people that had experience or knowledge around it. Maybe they went to a networking mixer and they're like, I need to do SEO. I'm going to invest in it, right? And it's going to do all this magical stuff. Never really learn about it, but then hire an agency and things go crazy, right? And I feel AI is like that same thing, right? Where people hear a little bit about it and they're like, I just need to implement AI to solve these problems. But, what's the first thing an entrepreneur should do to even start to investigate this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, I think I want to be clear. I'm a huge proponent of AI. So I'm not negative on AI at all. I'm a proponent of effective use of AI. And so, in your example, what should an entrepreneur focus on? Well, I think it comes back to this idea that I want to use AI to augment people. I want to make people better using AI. And, early days, everybody said, oh, AI is going to take my job. And I heard a lot of salespeople with this concept that, oh, they're going to have AI based salespeople that's going to take my job. And my answer to that is no, AI is not going to take your job, but the sales rep who effectively uses AI is going to take your job. Right. And so it's how do you make, it's how do you make an augmented human who takes the skills and knowledge that they've built up and then accelerates their effectiveness and their capabilities using AI. And I'm using it every day. Every email I write, every blog post I write, everything I write, I'm not asking AI to write it for me, but I'm absolutely posting it into an AI and asking it to improve it. And then I look at it and I see, is this in my voice? Is this something that represents me? Is it accurate? But it's not, I'm not letting AI do it for me. I'm just using AI to be more effective.
What's interesting is I had an opportunity to speak in front of a group of entrepreneurial students, and one of them reached out and they wanted to grab a half hour. Just he's kind of thirst for learning, and I sat down and I recorded it through Zoom, through the cloud recording. So after I recorded that half hour conversation, it gave me the video recording and then all of the notes, right? So I went through all of the notes, right click, copied, shoved all of that in ChatGPT, and I said, how do you think this went? And it gave me like some of the best feedback. It actually said, hey, you talked way too much. Like you offered a lot of value, but you really didn't listen. We score this about an 8.5 out of 10. And then I asked it another layer of questions and I said, if I were to consult, how much do you think this is worth per hour? And it literally gave me a specific detail and it said like, 250 to this, but if you change this and get it to a 9 point, like I was like, this is mind blowing. Like that's one little thing that you can do, but are there other things that you recommend or you see or tools or widgets? Like you had said email, like is that copy and pasting and putting everything in ChatGPT, or are you using extensions, or like how do you use this technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in terms of naming conventions. Big companies used to fight over naming conventions all the time, and I'm not going to name the companies, but one company released the term Copilot early on, and now everybody uses the term Copilot. It's become kind of a de facto standard for a parallel AI. And so I love the Copilot model, which is, whether it's old school tools like Grammarly, where as I'm typing, it's just saying, hey, you know what? You could say that in a better way. Anything that can have real time impact that doesn't require me to do a bunch of work and then do more work by engaging the AI. If it can do it in real time, then I see it as a value add. To your point about using Zoom and the AI there, it's great to use a call recording tool. And everybody uses call recording tools these days. There was a point in time when people were afraid of using tools like Gong because they were, oh, customers aren't going to let us record the calls. It's become such the norm now that, on a typical call, I'll have 3 or 4 note takers join the call at the same time because everybody's got their AI based note taker. Where I see the real value in these AI based note takers when they can start analyzing the conversation in real time. So I'm using a tool now that shows me a talk time monitor. And it says, you've been talking for 2.5 minutes. You might want to stop. And it's giving me that real world guidance or real time guidance of how to be more effective in the moment. It's kind of like I love to play golf. I'm terrible at it. And so I've tried taking lessons a few times, and it's great to take a lesson where you go out, they video your swing, you go back, you sit down, they're showing you the video, they're pointing out all the things you're doing wrong. Then you go back out and you try to fix them. If you try to do that on your own, that's like using AI to improve your writing after the fact. If the golf pro is standing there beside me, playing around with me, and as I'm stepping in to take the swing, he's like, wait, hold on, tip your shoulder back a little more. Now lean back a little bit. All right, now swing. When you get that real time instruction, it's order of magnitude more impactful.
You bring up that's a really great point, and I think right now, like, how do you have any recommendations for an entrepreneur? How do you weed through all the crap that's out there, right? Is it ChatGPT? Is it Copilot? Or, entrepreneurs in my experience have no shortage of ideas. It's the execution where you start to get into trouble, right? Where you need an operator, COO, but a visionary that's going to dabble. Like, where is there a good, like, Apple has, the app, all of their apps. I mean, is there something out there for AI right now that somebody can start to like understand? Oh, this solves this problem. This solves that problem. I personally haven't seen anything like that.
No, and I think in some ways it's a good thing you haven't seen that yet because that's when I get scared, right? That's when things get a little too advanced and I start getting worried. The reality of it is right now for an entrepreneur, you've got to be single minded. You got to be focused on what problem are you trying to solve, and whatever product it is. I'll give you an example. There's a fantastic entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur that I worked with in a company some time ago. Reached out to me and said, hey, Mike, you're a sales guy. I got an idea, right? The problem that I see is companies want to research products. They want to get quotes. They don't want to talk to salespeople. And salespeople want to find buyers that are in an active engagement cycle. So I want to create a platform that lets buyers explore information without having to expose who they are to the sales reps, and sales reps to respond to that information and find a way to bridge the two together so that the people that you really talk to are the ones that are actively engaged. And the people that you're talking to from a sales point of view on a buyer side are people that actually can solve your problem. And I'm like, fantastic idea. That's a problem. That's a real problem in the industry. Now focus on how to solve that problem. At no point has AI come into this equation at all. Now, there are specific things I need to do, which is I need to go test the problem. How do I find people that are potentially good fits for this? Perfect use of AI. Right now, I can go to AI and describe what I'm trying to do and say, who are potential people that I should talk to? Who are the buyer side? Who are the seller side? So enabling me to do the steps to get to market, to get to scale, to develop the product, those are fantastic uses of AI. But AI for the sake of AI is a complete distraction and should be avoided at all cost.
Now, how do you see this like taking a step back, right? when
Mhm.
I graduated from high school or college, I mean, cell phones just sort of came out. Technology was nowhere where it is today, but now you have like YouTube, you have all these different things. It's like, how does this impact schools and college, and even leading up to like you had mentioned, like your experience with large enterprise companies, or even if you go the entrepreneurial route. I mean, with devices now, and you have so much access to in the palm of your hand. Kids are just putting tests into Chat GPT or all these AIs. Like, how do you see that unraveling?
Yeah, it's funny. I looked at the stories around use of AI in education, and what was the first thing that popped up after people realized that they were writing papers using AI detectors.
Yep.
So somebody created a platform that I could put in a set of, a piece of writing and say, was this written by AI? Now, the funny thing is, I've tested that. I've done a couple of things where I had AI write something, and then I went in and made some changes and put it into one of those. And it came back and said, no chance. This is not AI at all. I'm like, well, I guess that means I probably could make it better, because if, if it doesn't think it's AI, it's probably not that good. But today, just go through any theme park, any restaurant, every kid that you see under 10 years old has got a device in their hand. 2 years old, they've got devices. Go on an airplane. You're going to see kids playing on iPads and tablets and phones. Kids, you see the YouTube videos all the time. Kids will pick up their parents' phone. They know how to unlock it. They know how to access apps. It's just second nature. So, like you said, when you grew up, picking up a telephone was second nature. You knew how to do it. My daughter is actually in a master's program right now for occupational therapy, and one of the things they do for cognitive testing is they test people on, are they able to write a check? And
Whoa.
her group is like, what do you mean? Why would we ever write a check? That's not a test of cognition anymore. And so all of our expectations are going to have to be updated based on this digital generation. They already know how to use these tools. So how do you make them more effective? How do you meet them where they are and give them access to the tools they need, but also take the experience of those of us with some gray hair and put that into a context that they understand and they can utilize?
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and what's funny, my son actually he used ChatGPT to complete an assignment. Right, he's 15, and I said, "Can't your teachers just detect that stuff with the software?" He goes, "Oh yeah, but what you do is you tell the chatbot to make itself undetected."
See, prompt engineering, right? That's going to be the next skill set, is prompt engineering.
So it's like you develop, you use content, right, for AI, and then the solution is, well, let's make a detector, and then you just tell the AI to be undetect like, it's kinda mind blowing if you think about it. But then I'm also like, to the kids, right? I'm like, that's creative thinking, right? I mean, it might be kinda sick to think that way, but I'm like, he's starting to think because, yeah, you're right. I mean, I see kids on devices and they're glued to the thing, and all the content they're getting is in such short form now, right, through TikTok and all these other Snapchat. I mean, my kids literally don't call on the phone. It's all I tell them, like, their cell phone is like a Snapchat device and a TikTok device. Like, they almost don't even know what a phone number is. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I actually sent my phone number to somebody in a Slack message a year ago, and I was like, hey, give me a call. And they're like, wait, is this a Zoom link? What is this? And I'm like, it's my phone number. Let's actually have a human conversation.
What's crazy now, like, when I see my wife on the phone, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, is everything okay?" Like, because it's usually just texting, which is wild, and how does that, like, shape business, right, for you on the CRO side? I mean, if I rewind back to 2009, everything was phone, email, Lotus Notes just came out, PDF documents, like, it's just started now, how do you see that shaping the new wave of sales for entrepreneurial or enterprise companies?
Yeah, in some ways, I say everything that is old is new again. And whether you think about it in a sine wave or a pendulum swing, technology shifts. And just like you described, there's all these new tools that are coming out, all these point solutions that are coming out. We're at the extreme end of that pendulum swing, where innovation is at a peak. Now, what happens is that pendulum is already starting to swing back the other way, where some of that innovation is going to die because it can't find a market, can't find revenue. and can't find a way to grow. And the other innovation is either going to get big and make a lot of money and buy up all the other things. And you go from, and you can look out over the past 30 years in enterprise software and see that's happening. It's a bunch of point solutions come along that have a particular value add, some differentiator from the existing way of doing things. They build up enough market share, enough presence that either they acquire or they get acquired. They become the big companies. They become the suites. They have to focus on integrating all these tools together. Their innovation drops. And now you have the swing to suites. As you get that swing to big enterprise suites there, then people recognize, hey, there's something else I need. They build a point solution and the swing starts back the other way. So, with AI, it's kind of the same story, right? We built up Chat GPT. It's gotten huge. In many ways, this market right now is a market of talent acquisitions. So there's so many AI startups out there. Last I saw, over 3,000 in the past year, new companies starting up specifically for an AI-based tool, that the vast majority of those companies, unfortunately, are not going to make it. And so the big companies are recognizing that, and they're going to buy up and acquire those smaller companies. But the ones that are going to proliferate are the ones that, again, go back to that basic entrepreneurial problem of, what problem am I solving? Solve that problem, do it different. Don't just be the same as somebody else, right? You've got to create your own category. You've got to be completely different in how you're approaching it. And those are the companies that are going to succeed and do well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So um what's your experience share around like sales today, right? As a fractional CRO, I mean, is it still like, meet potential clients where they're at and solve the problem through whatever mechanism that they like to communicate? Or, you know, what are the methods? You got cold calling, you got email marketing campaigns, obviously there's branding, but as a salesperson, like what do you see in the market that is still most effective?
Yeah, believe it or not, it's in that pendulum swing, right? Face-to-face meetings are coming back. And a lot of the people I talk to, and I know a lot of great sales leaders, companies are even putting quotas around face-to-face sales meetings. That personal touch is now new. It's something interesting. It's new again. It doesn't mean people want to interact with a salesperson right away. And that's the key, is understanding the buyer journey and how do people interact with your company, your product, and your people. So if I look at a typical buyer journey, metrics will say at least 70% of that buyer journey happens before they ever interact with a real person. And that could be through perusing the website, finding information on public sources like G2, and understanding, referral based business, still researching through Google, researching through AI. And a lot of companies do that as well. So that's already happening. The buyer journey is not in the control of the salesperson anymore. And so I've talked publicly quite a bit about a lot of the legacy sales methodologies that just don't work anymore, because the idea of most of these sales methodologies is, how do you as a sales rep retain control over the process? And today, I think sales control over a buying process is a fallacy. It doesn't exist. What you have to do is better understand where your customer is in their journey and meet them at their point they're at. And that's a data-driven sales process, where now I'm tracking website activity. I've got monitors on, are they hitting my site? What are the search terms they're looking for? I can see the signals in the buying intent. When I see someone who's expressing an interest, then I start giving them just knowledge sharing, not trying to sell them anything, just awareness, giving them information, targeted ads that are very specific and very tailored to where somebody is in that journey. And then when they're ready to interact, I want to make it available in whatever format they want, whether that's through a chatbot on a website that a real human gets involved with, through a phone call, or through a group dinner where we bring a group of people together in a particular city and do just open information sharing. It's very different than it used to be in that the buyer retains the control.
No, it's really interesting points you make. I mean, my mind toggles back to like outside sales versus inside sales. You talked a lot about, founder led sales, but a lot of what you just mentioned seems like all the technology and all the marketing and branding is doing the majority of the work. How does that shape the sales landscape, right? Because you have the old traditional go out, shake hands, kiss babies, you're kind of doing the road show, but do you see the paradigm shift or the shift of, whether it's called inside sales or like, the technology is doing all the, 70% of the work, and then you have really good sales staff that can handle inbound? Because there's that inbound versus outbound struggle, right? Of sales guys saying, am I going to get leads in this company, or am I going to have to go hunt, 100% of my time?
Yeah, I'm a baseball guy, so I like to use Yogi Berra isms, and my favorite is I want 40% of my pipeline to come from marketing. In other words, inbound activity. I want 40% of my pipeline to come from partners and their network and their team, and I want 40% of my pipeline to come from my sales team actually doing outbound activity. I figure if I can keep that ratio, I'm hitting 120% of my pipeline target. I'm in good shape. So 40, 40, 40 is the number I always try to accomplish.
If you could only keep one of those, which one do you think is the most important?
You can't. I refuse to answer that question. There are some cases where partners may not be the right fit. Now, in the enterprise B2B space, I would argue that's also just a misunderstanding of the sales process, because whether it's a GSI, a local VAR, a distributor, a cloud provider, the influence those companies have over the purchasing decisions and the technology direction is massive, and it's typically very much underestimated. And if you don't know who the partner is that's influencing that buying decision, then you're probably at risk for that deal not closing.
As a CRO, in your experience, like taking a look at those three buckets, if you will, marketing, partners, traditional sales efforts, right? To me, that's like three big buckets. Do you see somebody at the head of marketing, the head of partners, the head of sales, and those are like three different groups that need to harmonize well together? Like, how would you build that team and that structure? I mean, obviously, it's different for different companies, but what would be the ideal scenario in your mind?
Well, you've come full circle back to the original question, which is why am I doing fractional work? Everybody needs it. Most people can't afford it, especially in the entrepreneurial startup space. So to have a chief revenue officer, a head of marketing, a head of partners, that could exceed, the cost of those three people alone could exceed an early stage company's revenue. And that's the problem. I've had companies with $1 million in revenue want to hire me as a CRO. And my answer is, you're just not big enough. You're not ready for a CRO. I would argue that you need to be in the 10 to 20 million of ARR before you really should be bringing on a full-time CRO. And it could be said same thing for CMO and marketing. Now, can you have one person that does all of those things? Sure. I haven't met that person that's capable of doing all those things yet, but maybe with AI they exist. I mean, I can go into Salesforce and HubSpot and I can do some of my own operations, but I know that to get what I need and to get to the level I need a really good marketing or sales operations person or revenue operations person. I know to really effectively do SEO, SEM, AI-based searches, all those things, I need somebody who is an expert in that space. So I think that's why, fractional is the new black, right? Everybody's looking at how I can get talented people who understand, who have the experience to do the things I need, at a cost structure that I can afford as an entrepreneur. The proliferation of fractional executives at this point is massive. So you can bring on people to do each of those activities if you're doing it with a well-structured plan and you're doing it in a fractional capacity.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's like my main company, we're fractional CMO, so I totally agree with everything you say. I take it a step further in the sense of I've hired previous companies, C-level executives, where I'm like, they kind of only work fractionally anyway. And the reality is, if you hire a fractional, they're going to dedicate and be dialed in and deliver at a really high level. And the beauty is for a business, if it's not working out, right? If it's not a good fit, it's not working out, it's not an employee. There doesn't have to be a long-term relationship. I mean, most fractionals I know, it's month to month. Like you're either delivering value or you're not, and they move on, right? So I think it's really important what you said too, because in my mind, right, or as an entrepreneur, it's like you have to make capital investments to continue to grow. And to me, it's a game of double. It's like that jump rope game where it's like, when do you jump in because you don't want to blow it up and get hit, but you have to make those capital investments. But to me, sales cures all. You still have to have a great deliverable, but sales typically will fuel that in my experience. So what would you recommend then for an entrepreneur, right? Because most entrepreneurial companies are founder led. Everything you said is spot on. Founders excited, but at some point they have to make that transition, right? They have to pass the baton. Would you bring in a fractional CRO first with that quote, that founder and say, all right, we're going to build a strategy and execute together? Because that entrepreneur is going to want to bring in a sales guy right away and just say, I'm too busy. There's so many meetings. I just got to bring people in. What would you recommend as the best structure in your experience?
Yeah, and I think, for me, I would say it depends on a couple of things. If you've got so much inbound interest, you've got people that are talking about it, you're getting demand, I would bring in a sales rep. I would bring in a sales rep and I would test, can I transfer my founder knowledge to this sales rep? And can that person be successful? And then if I can start to, impose them with my experience and knowledge, and I can see them be successful selling the product the way that I do, then you think about scaling, right? And that scaling is where I typically would look to bring in a fractional executive that's got the experience to do it. Because that's really the point where you need somebody that's been there, that's done it before, that knows the different structures, the processes to put in place, the tools to put in place. Bringing that person in first, and I've had companies that wanted me to do it. The first thing I'm going to do, if you bring me in to a company where it's founder-led sales, is that I'm going to look at how do I take that founder knowledge and transfer it into a sales rep. And I can do that myself, but I can't do it as effectively as a full-time sales rep. So I'm happy to be involved in customer conversations, but I'm not there every day answering the phone, following up on email and following up on demos and meetings. That's where a sales rep is really key, is that tactical part of the business.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that's a really hard thing, right? I think for an entrepreneur to do the data transfer, because the founder is like such a unique person, so much passion. And then you have a sales rep who might be thirsty and they have passion, but they're not the founder, right? But at some point something's got to give, because a founder gets to a point, whether it's people, revenue, or just something where they're like, lack of follow up, or so that's really interesting. So then how important is it what's some of the first things that you would do in that scenario? Like get that sales rep in to get to transfer knowledge, and then it's build out like a sales playbook. Like what would be the next move after that?
Yeah, I actually did a presentation at the end of last year about tearing up the playbook, and that the playbook is actually an antiquated concept. This is where bringing in an organization that's a fractional marketing organization or a fractional go-to-market organization can really help. You got to get the infrastructure in place. I've come into organizations where their Salesforce environment was such a mess because there were hundreds of opportunities there, none of them real, none of them followed up on. They had integrations with HubSpot. They had every tool known to sales, none of them integrated, none of them, no single source of the truth. And that's that idea of I'm a founder and I'm just going to keep doing stuff. And, oh, wait, I need a tool to do this. I'll just go buy it. Doesn't cost that much. But the cost isn't in the cost of the tool. The cost is in the lost opportunity that you have in not getting these things integrated. So getting that sales rep in, but also getting the advice of somebody who can help you set up the tech. If I can be very focused on the opportunities that are actually have a good opportunity to close, so I understand what my ideal client profile is, or at least I have an idea what it is and I can go test it. I understand what personas actually show interest in my product or could benefit from my product. I can explain the value-based messaging. And I say that very specifically because if I'm talking about a feature of a product, I'm probably not going to scale, right? I got to talk about what value does my product bring to you? as an individual within this company, within this context, what problem do you have that my platform or my solution can help with, right? If I can explain that in a language to you that you understand, that's a value-based message. And then bringing in the right tools and the support for that, you can really, accelerate the capabilities of your first 1, 2, 3, 5 sales reps before you have to bring in a full-time CRO or sales leader. But having that foundational element in place is critical.
One last question. So I know this is subject to the company, but what's your favorite like sales tool, CRM? I mean, there's Salesforce, HubSpot. There's a million of them out there, right? And they all fulfill a certain purpose. But is there anything for you that just stands out that's just a really good platform that you love?
I'll reference, I just posted an article on LinkedIn a couple of days ago about stack ranking your sales tech stack. And the idea behind it is, every year I'll get the head of finance coming back to me going, hey, you're spending X amount of dollars per sales rep. And, we really need to cut that down by 10 to 15% or whatever the number is. And so it's kind of constant exercise that I do and most CROs do, which is, all right, what tools do we have? What tools are we actually using? And I basically broke them down into 8 different categories, first being CRM. And my first point was, yeah, I get it. We all hate the CRM, but it's a requirement. We have to have it. I think the challenge with a CRM is you want to start with something that's simple. You want to start with something that you can grow with. But if you get big, then you quite often outgrow those early stage tools. I've used Zoho. I've used Dynamics back in the old days, Siebel, HubSpot, Salesforce. For a big organization, Salesforce is probably the best tool out there because they've got the most integrations, the most capabilities, the most customization. I find HubSpot to be much easier, especially if you're using it across the stack. And that's one where I can configure it myself. I can get it up and running. I can do what I need to do with it. The integrations out there are pretty much out of the box these days. So it's not hard to integrate tools together. But yeah, nobody has a perfect CRM yet. Nobody's got the right answer.
Well, Michael, I could talk to you for a long time. I love this topic. It's near and dear to my heart. I love it. But I want to thank you for coming on today. Learned a lot. I think I think you were able to spark a lot of ideas. So any entrepreneur listening, you got to start thinking about this stuff, right? So in the event somebody's got some more questions or they want to read some of your articles or reach out to you, what's the easiest way somebody can find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn. You certainly can connect with me on LinkedIn. My company, as you said, is called Sales Growth International. It's easy, Mike@salesgrowthinternational.com. And I'm always happy to have those conversations. I love meeting entrepreneurs. I love hearing the ideas. And if I can help in any way, I'm happy to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael. If you learned something, please share the podcast. But again, I really appreciate the time today. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.